Is growing on X mostly luck, or is it mostly skill? Well, I recently started a brand new X account to find out. And in this video, I'm gonna share the exact strategy I used to grow that account from zero. All right, so many of you that have been following me for a while will know that I used to run a theme page called Ensign Gridiron. This was the first X account that I got monetized, and I ran it for a while until I was unfortunately permanently demonetized because of platform manipulation. And for a while, I've been wanting to start this account back up again and do things the right way. So a couple months ago, I made it happen. I initially started back in March, but I wasn't really taking things seriously, so I didn't see very much progress. But then a few months later in July, I subscribed to X Premium and started taking things a little more seriously, and things progressed pretty quickly. We'll get into the results in a minute, but I first want to share the 5 specific strategies I used to get that account off the ground. The first one, which I just touched on, is subscribing to X Premium. And the reason why this is so important is that blue checks get prioritized in replies and search, so that makes it easier to get visibility. Before, when I didn't have a blue check, I got no visibility, so in turn, I got no engagement. But after I got a blue check, my posts started showing higher in search, and then I started getting more traction. And this leads into my second strategy, which is targeting underserved topics in search. Ensign Gridiron is a place where I talk about football with a specific emphasis on players and teams from my home state of Utah. And not all these players are the best player on their team, so that means there's less people talking about them. That gives me an advantage because I know there's demand for content about these players, but there's a shortage of supply. For example, Jacob Robinson and Tyler Batty are 2 players that played college football at BYU, but were not selected in the NFL draft. For those not familiar with football, basically this means there's not as much hype surrounding these players, even though they still signed with NFL teams after the draft and are currently participating in training camp in preparation for the upcoming season. But because I know BYU fans are interested in how they're doing, I've created content about them, and I've gotten a ton of engagement, even with very few followers. For example, I made this Jacob Robinson post when I only had about 20 followers, and it got around 50,000 impressions. Or I made these 2 posts about Tyler Batty when I only had 30 followers, and both of them got over 10,000 impressions. So by targeting underserved topics in search, I was able to get a ton of traffic to my profile, and as a result, I gained a bunch of followers. Which, for those of you who are not familiar with X, that is extremely hard to do, because small accounts typically don't get very much visibility. That being said, not all of this traffic is from search. If you look closely, you'll notice that all of these posts have a decent number of reposts. So search is what got these posts discovered initially, but the reason why they got so many impressions is because people shared them. And this only happens if the post is formatted in such a way that makes it shareable. So in the case of this post, it casts Jacob Robinson in a positive light, so anyone that's a fan of Jacob Robinson is likely to share it. But also, the post is easy to consume and contains a picture, so that just makes people even more likely to share it. And when I say super easy to consume, what I'm referring to is the structure of the post. Notice how it's written concisely, and it's also broken out into 2 separate lines, which makes it way easier to read. If I had combined those 2 sentences into 1 paragraph, I'd be willing to bet this post doesn't get even half as much traction as it did, simply because it would be harder to read. The next strategy I used is doubling down on the posts that worked and then backing off on the ones that didn't. For example, I started the page by talking a lot about Jackson Dart, but because he was a first-round pick in the NFL draft and he's a quarterback, there was a lot more people that were talking about him, so it made it harder for me to rank and search. So I had probably made about 10 posts about Dart before I tried making one about Zach Wilson, And then this is the first post that blew up. That post took off among BYU fans, and then that gave me the idea to make the Jacob Robinson post, and then that one performed even better. In the days since then, I've made 3 to 4 more posts about Zach Wilson that have all done well, and then I've sprinkled in posts about other BYU players, and while not all of them have performed well, some of them have, like these Tyler Batty posts. Since the first one got over 10,000 impressions, I kept my eye out for more content about Tyler Batty, and then when I saw some, I made another post, and sure enough, that one got over 10,000 impressions as well. If something works once, there's a high probability that it will work again. All right, then the last thing I've done is focus on quality over quantity. Every time someone sees one of my posts, I want them to have a good experience because that's going to impact how they react when they see my posts again in the future. So rather than spamming the feed, I try to only share the best stuff I find. And that might mean that I only post once a day, but I would rather do that than be constantly spamming the feed and make people ignore my future posts. As a result of following these 5 strategies, I've managed to gain over 60 followers in just a couple weeks, and based on how things are going, it doesn't appear to be slowing down. If you look at this graph here, July 20th is when I bought premium, and then every day since then, I've been gaining followers. So there's a pretty good chance that by the time this video is edited and posted, I will have a lot more followers than I do right now. But the best part of this whole thing is that all this growth has happened without me spending hardly any time replying to people. All the growth is coming organically because people like my content. So not only has this experiment destroyed the narrative that good content doesn't perform well on X, it's also destroyed the narrative that you have to be a reply guy to gain followers. If you know what you're doing, you can grow just by posting high quality content tightly focused around a niche because you position yourself as an authority in that space. And that should be the goal, whether you're running a theme page or a personal account. What are you known for? If you or your followers can't answer that question, maybe that's why you're not growing. This is something I've been thinking a lot about recently with my personal account because I used to be the X monetization and shadow ban guy, but I've recently started moving away from that just because of how things are trending. But as a result of that decision, I'm now seeing less engagement and I'm growing slower because I'm not posting that same content. And there's also less of a demand for that content as well. If I want my personal X account to start taking off again, I need to reestablish what I am known for. So that's the next goal. If you find yourself in a similar position, click the video on screen to learn my 3-step formula for choosing a profitable niche.